Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Leecamp. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. As you might be able to tell, this is not live streamed, but instead is a video premiere because I've had to unexpectedly travel. So I am bringing you the episode. I'm taping it a couple of hours before you're seeing it, but that will not change the information I have to give you. And I've got a pretty great episode for you today. A pretty rare, kind of exclusive. Someone who's I'm trying to parse my words here. Someone who's an awesome human being, and they are an Israeli, and they I won't give the name because I don't want anything bad to happen to them, but they have had a child who refused to be in the military in Israel. And anyway, that person offered to close caption to translate some Israeli broadcast propaganda to show you, to bring to you and to me the propaganda that Israelis are getting in their home country, in their home language, and uh, and and show you exactly what it is they're being fed. And actually, the segment I'm going to cover has a lot to do with what Americans believe as well. And it's really fascinating to see the garbage that is being spit out to Israelis in real time as they commit, as their government in their name and their military, which almost every Israeli serves in the military. Shouldn't use that word serve, but is in the military for 2 years. That's the standard. But to show the garbage that is spit out in order to get these people to be brainwashed enough to endorse a genocide, to endorse killing over 23,000 people in just 3 months, to endorse such horrific crimes as cutting off food and water and bombing hospitals, etc. You guys don't need me to repeat all of that again. But anyway, so I'm going to bring you these clips right now, and we're just going to go through some of them. And again, these have been translated. As you'll hear, they're speaking Hebrew. And this is one of the large mainstream channels in Israel, mainstream news broadcasts in Israel. And I mean, it's tough to imagine what it must feel like to be an Israeli, to be a few miles away from where genocide is being rained down on fellow human beings. But most of Israel supports this genocide. Unbelievably, but it has to do with the amount of brainwashing that they're getting and the amount of propaganda that's getting fed to them. And anyway, I'm just going to dive right into this and analyze some of it. So, again, this is one of the main news broadcasts in Israel, and as you can see, he's saying, and I'll try and read some of what's on the screen as well, because I know that some of you are listening to the podcast version of this, which you wouldn't be able to understand the Hebrew, or most of you. So anyway, he talks about he starts out by introducing the person, Noah Tishby, who he calls the unofficial ambassador to the channel 12, I think. And he says, doing the sacred work of hasbara, which is the Hebrew term for propaganda. It's technically explaining, but if you were going to give your propaganda a name, you wouldn't call it propaganda, would you? You'd call it explaining. We're explaining why genocide is good. So he says, doing the sacred work of hasbara.
לא רשמית שלנו, נועה תשבי, שעושה שם עבודת קודש של הסברה, כמו שאומרים באנגלית. כן, אנחנו משועשעים, אבל כפי שאמרנו, המצב שלנו לא טוב.
He says, our situation is not good. Yeah, it's not good because you're committing genocide. Isn't it funny how that can be it's just such a bummer in your life when you and your society are committing genocide and you're on one of the main news broadcasts doing the propaganda to manufacture consent for genocide. It's just such a bummer. So he brings the information of or the stats of this new poll that's just been done and immediately misrepresents what the poll says. He says half of Americans aged 18 to 24, so younger Americans, think that Hamas is on the right side of this conflict. Well, first of all, that is not what the poll said. The poll is asking, which side do you think is the right side, the Palestinian side or the Israeli side? But they need to misrepresent the poll, because otherwise the poll sounds kind of correct or kind of fine. Oh, you think Palestinians have it harder right now? Interesting, because they're being genocided. Yeah, that does sound rough. But instead, they conflate anyone who supports Palestinians at all with you support Hamas. But beyond just support Hamas, as you'll see, they say you like want Hamas to kill people. Like they have to misrepresent what the poll actually said.
אמריקנים, גיל 18 עד 24,
He says Hamas is on the right side of this conflict.
חושבים שחמאס צודק בעימות הזה.
כן, 51 מצעירים.
And then she says, yes, 51% of young Americans believe that in order to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
כן, בגילאי 18 עד 24 חושב שכדי לפתור את הסכסוך הישראלי-פלסטיני, צריך לתת את ישראל.
Israel must be handed over to Hamas. That is not at all what the poll said, which is just so, it's just such a funny way to phrase it. I mean, it's hilarious, but it is propaganda because the idea, the reason they misrepresent the poll, because they want Israelis especially, but also maybe some international audience to be shocked, They want Hamas, they want Israel to be handed over to Hamas. Well, that's not what the poll said. Very few people want Israel to be handed to Hamas. What they want is freedom and the right to self-determination and the right to survive for Palestinians. But that's not how she wants to represent this poll, right? So instead, she says, oh, that when they say they want freedom for Palestinians, that means handing Israel over to Hamas. It is complete bullshit. It is complete lies. But of course, that's their job, propaganda. And this is what's fed to every Israeli. And I guess most of them believe it. And so then she gets into, well, how could this be that 51% of young people in America want Israel to be handed over to Hamas? How could this be? And her explanation is then it's decades of neglect of all the aspect of Israeli Hasbara, which again, they say means explaining, but in fact, it means propaganda. But even that idea is laughable. Neglect of Israeli propaganda? Israeli propaganda has been forced into our minds for decades through all of the Western media. You guys, I don't need to explain this to you. Like, the Palestinian point of view has gotten near zero coverage on Western media and, of course, Israeli media for decades. Zero. And many of the people who said the slightest thing were fired or pushed out from the networks where they did it, where they even slightly gave the Palestinian point of view. Mark Lamont Hill, fired from CNN, was a hot up-and-comer at CNN, fired from CNN for giving a speech where he said Palestine will be free, calling for freedom for a people. Now, why is that controversial? It's not, unless you completely own the narrative and can get people fired for saying it. Rick Sanchez, who I ended up working with at RT later, but Rick Sanchez was on CNN. And one of the things that likely got him forced out from CNN was he did a segment where he was talking to someone about what was happening to Palestine. I think this was during, it was years ago, it was during earlier fighting, where Israel was bombing the shit out of Palestinians. And he basically very kind of in a not even pushy way gave some pushback to the idea that Israel is just completely in the right, saying things. I think he said things like, yeah, but the Palestinians, have tiny little rockets that do almost nothing. Some of them have rocks. And then Israel has one of the most powerful militaries in the world, right? Like those type of responses. And I think just that slight little pushback was one of the main reasons he got forced out at CNN. And that is the type of dynamic you have. So the idea that she's saying, oh, we have failed to have pro-Israel propaganda out there. Oh, have you? I don't know how much more there could be. What are you going to do? Have it printed on children's lunchboxes? You're going to have it tattooed on our faces? It is pro-Israel. Propaganda is everywhere. And as we just found out the other day, The Intercept just covered that all CNN coverage. So first of all, reporters are not allowed into Gaza and cannot get in there. And the couple that have gotten into Gaza, it's because they were embedded with the IDF. So the IDF shows them what it is they want to show them. So that's just propaganda. But The Intercept just reported that all CNN coverage of Israel gets funneled through a Jerusalem office that is overseen by IDF censors. So nothing is reported on CNN, essentially. Maybe CNN International has some loopholes here and there, but nothing is reported on CNN that hasn't been approved by IDF censors. And she's saying, we just haven't put out enough pro-Israel propaganda.
הזנחה בכל מה שקשור להסברה ישראלית. עכשיו, במשך עשרות שנים ישראל ממותגת הבעיה, מה
She says the problem with what happened on October 7th is not that people were not horrified.
באוקטובר, 7 באוקטובר, זה לא שאנשים לא הזדעזעו. הם הזדעזעו, אבל עם מה שנקרא
They were horrified with an asterisk. They were horrified.
שאמר מזכ"ל האו"ם, זה לא קרה בוואקום, אחר כך הוא חזר בו.
He says, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't happen in a vacuum. There is context and so on. Now, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that statement. Oh, there was context to October 7th? What? How could that be? How could there be any context to the things that happen in the world? But of course, she goes on to say, she goes on to stretch it even more. She says, meaning they were horrified, but they said, hold on, Israel deserved this. Which is not, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't some people that are saying that, but the mainstream narrative, what most people are talking about that say there is context, are not saying, oh yeah, anyone who died, they freaking deserved it. Yeah, good on them for dying. No, and furthermore, of course, they're ignoring the context that the IDF did most of the killing on October 7th and killed hundreds of civilians, and we may never know the exact numbers of how many were killed by the IDF, but it was rock a load. So yeah, it's that type of context. They don't want that context, and so she has stretched it to say people aren't asking for context. People are saying, "Oh, Israel deserves this," and again, I'm not saying there aren't people who make the argument that Israel deserved this. Oh, I don't know, for being an apartheid state and perpetrating, and deserved is the wrong word. Again, you fall into these propaganda hooks where you're arguing within their bounds of discussion. Deserve is the wrong word. Those who say, quote unquote, Israel deserved this, they don't say they deserved it. They say, this is the end result. This is inevitable. When you put people into an open air prison, when you murder hundreds of thousands, when you cut off water and cut off medicine and kids, people watch their kids die on a daily basis. When you do all that to people, the inevitable result is that a certain segment, in maybe a tiny segment, but a certain segment of that population is going to decide, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to go, take hostages or kill people on the Israeli side. It's kind of like saying when you have slaves, when you have slavery like the U.S. did, it's kind of inevitable that at some point a certain percentage of slaves are going to rebel and kill people. And it's not saying deserved, although you are welcome to make that argument. It's saying this is the inevitable result. It's putting together two things that if I knew more about chemistry, I would have had the example on hand and watching them explode into fire. And you'd say, well, that's an inevitable result when you put those two things together. All right. But of course she has to stretch it and...
רגע, שנייה, אבל בעצם למה זה הגיע לישראל? ישראל בוודאי הייתה צריכה לעשות משהו כדי שזה יגיע לה. וזה העניין של ההזנחה הזו שישראל...
And she says Israel must have, she's quoting other people. She says other people say Israel must have done something to deserve this. And she says that like scoffingly, like Israel must have done something to deserve this. Well, again, not deserve, but the inevitable result of having an apartheid state oppressing people and destroying their lives and killing their families, etc., stealing their land, all this stuff. The inevitable result is that you are either going to have every person locked up in prison, or you are going to have a shit show of pain and misery at some point. Now, of course, this has been going on for decades and decades. See, that says Israel is viewed as an occupying state. I wonder why that is. Why is it Israel is viewed as an occupying state? I don't know. I can't come up with a reason. And she says, and we didn't actually do anything. And sometimes the propaganda is so ridiculous that it's like, I think even as a propagandist, you're not doing yourself justice. Like, if you really want to win people over, you don't go, Israel didn't do anything. No, if you really wanted to be a good propagandist, you come up with some stupid reasons as to why Israel did the stuff they're doing. But acting like they didn't do anything is going a bit too far.
אנשים חושבים שישראל באופן שיטתי
She then says Israel think Israel think Israel is systematically committing genocide for years. Why is it? Why do they think that? I don't understand. I don't understand. What could it have been? What could it have been that made people think that? I cannot, for the life of me, come up with a reason that has made people think that. Maybe it was reality. Maybe they just opened their eyes and looked and saw things.
מבצעת רצח עם כבר שנים. אז ברגע שאנחנו באים ואומרים, הם אלה שניסו לעשות רצח עם בנו.
So she then says, so when we say, no, they're the ones committing genocide against us, people go, what? You know why people go, what? Because it's not true at all. Just look at the number of deaths on one side versus the other. It is not Palestinians committing genocide against Israelis. I'm sorry.
אז אומרים שנייה, אבל אתם כבר מבצעים רצח עם פלסטינאים במשך הרבה מאוד שנים.
All right, I want to skip ahead. Let's see here.
בישראל, האם ישראל מבצעת רצח עם?
She said, I went to New York and I asked people, is Israel committing genocide of Palestinians?
כולם אמרו לי כן.
And they all said yes. And she says it in a way where she's like, and they all said yes. What? What? I wonder why they all said yes.
אז נתתי את המספרים. היו 160,000 פלסטינאים ערבים.
She says, then I gave them the numbers that there were 160,000 Palestinians, Arabs in Israel in 1948. And now there are 2 million. How can that be? Her point is, how can that be genocide? 160,000 and now there are 2 million. Okay, a few things. First of all, she's lying. Those are not the actual numbers. 160,000 is the number of Palestinians that remained within Israel proper, within the Israel proper borders after 1948, after the Nakba, after killing hundreds of thousands, after kicking people out of their village, after forcing Palestinians to flee. And many of them did flee because they feared for their family, they feared for their safety. So many of them went to surrounding countries. Some of them went to West Bank and Gaza, as you know. Many of them went to Gaza. So after all of that, the fleeing, the killing, the murder, the Nakba, all of that, there were 160,000 left. So you commit ethnic cleansing and then you go, well, okay, there's 160,000 Palestinians here. It's like, yeah, those are the ones you've allowed to remain after killing or pushing out all the others. Anyway, so she says 160,000. And then she says, now there are 2 million. How within Israel proper? There's far more than 2 million if you count West Bank and Gaza, but she's not doing that. She's just talking about Israel proper. 160,000 used to be, now it's 2 million. Even if that were true, and even if you ignored the what went on 1948, still, so people have kids and the number grows. I don't know if you know how that works. It's like people, they'll often get together and then they do the dirty and then they have kids. And I mean that of all people. I don't mean that of Palestinians. It turns out like all humans, if they choose to, can get together and then, or most humans, and then they pump out more of the people. Is just how it works. So she's acting like because the number within Israel proper again, has grown, that means no genocide was or is being committed. Bullshit. That number can grow and still you committed genocide. Still you committed ethnic cleansing. Before 1948, it was clear ethnic cleansing. As I've brought to you on this live stream, on this show, the internal documents of what Israel was doing in 47, 48 is internal discussion of how to ethnically cleanse, talking about going to villages, talking about killing those who resist, talking about kicking out those who don't. There is discussion internally, and these documents have been revealed, and I showed them to you on this live stream before, of the plan for ethnic cleansing. So just because there were 160,000 left after you killed hundreds of thousands, just because there was that number and now there's 2 million does not mean it was not genocide. That's not what those numbers mean at all, even if they are accurate. And, you know, but she's acting like that means there could never have been any genocide or ethnic cleansing. She says people can't digest this information because of brainwashing. No, they can't digest that information because they don't have the facts. You presented them with a false fact, essentially, if you omit everything that's surrounding it, and they didn't know how to deal with your false facts.
האינפורמציה הזאת.
עכשיו זה כבר
לרוב
צריך
העסק
לומר...
זה לא צריך אין הסברה
לא, אנחנו לא
מספיקה.
יודעים.
So she then keeps saying there's not sufficient Hasbara, there's not sufficient propaganda, we're not propagandizing the world enough, which again is hilarious. Nothing is propagandized more in Western media than the pro-Israel stance.
אני חושבת שאנשים בבית יודעים את זה היטב.
She says there's no strategy, there's no money. No money thing is hilarious. And again, as a Jew myself, an anti-Zionist Jew, I don't like the stereotype that, oh, Jews have money. Well, guess what? You do not have to give in to dumb stereotypes and dumb racism and dumb anti-Semitism to point to where, yes, there are very rich Jews, just as there are very rich people of all types. There are, Elon Musk is very rich. There are very rich people of all types. The very rich ones, and again, all very rich Zionists that are not Jewish as well, have pumped crazy amounts of money, billions over the past many decades, into various forms of Hasbara, various forms of propaganda, brainwashing, all kinds. I mean, hell, an American, he died recently, thank goodness, but his wife still runs his empire. Sheldon Adelson, the biggest donor to Donald Trump, gave $100 million to Donald Trump's campaign. He owns, and his family continues to own, the largest, and he founded, the largest red newspaper in Israel. The number one in terms of information in front of eyeballs is owned by an American Adelson family that got their money from the Sands casinos. So they get their money by, destroying people's lives, and then they use it to indoctrinate Israelis. And he, of course, has funded plenty of propaganda outlets in the United States as well, and puts his politicians into office. And anyway, I'm not going to get into all the details of the money, but the idea that there's not enough money towards pro-Israel propaganda is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
שאין הסברה מספיקה, אין אסטרטגיה, אין כסף. אני חושבת ש...
Oh, yeah, she then goes into the foreign ministry. They don't have enough money. They're amazing people who work there day and night. And she then says, I know firsthand that the embassies don't have enough money to take people to a restaurant or for coffee. First of all, the idea that they don't have enough money for restaurants or coffee is laughable. They have plenty of money. But beyond that, I love the idea that, like, if we were committing genocide and there had just been enough money for us to take some people out to restaurants, then our genocide would not be known. Then we could cover up the fact that we're committing genocide against Palestinians if we had just had enough money to take people to dinner. If you just take a few more people out to dinner, then we could have gotten away with genocide. But as it stands, we couldn't go out to dinner, and then genocide got revealed to the world. It's, again, this is aggressive propaganda combined with just sheer stupidity. Just amazing. Okay, I don't want to run out of time because this is going to be a shorter episode than normal, but so they start talking about the U.S. celebrities that have been visiting Israel and supporting this genocide. One of the big names is Jerry Seinfeld, actually making trips over there to Brad Gelman, Michael Rappaport have made trips to Israel to help Jared Kushner, Ivanka, Deborah Messing, have headed over to Israel to promote the genocide, to say the genocide is awesome and we should all really endorse genocide and endorse murdering children. And anyway, she talks about how great it is that they're doing that. But it's not enough. They feel the need to come, and it's something we need to understand. There's a big change with the American Jews that understand this sort of connection. So she then says that American Jews are doing the best they can to promote this, to say, yay, genocide. She says, we need to view them as a strategic asset She then talks about putting more money into it. I don't know if people at home understand the billions of dollars that are streamed to Israel from these celebrities. So one moment she says they don't have any money. The next moment she says we receive billions of dollars from, she says mainly American Jews. Obviously not all of those what she listed were Jews, Jared and Ivanka, for example. But they do receive, Israel does receive billions upon billions of dollars from Zionists around the world. Now, more of those, believe it or not, even though she's listed mainly Jews, more of those are actually Christians. There's more money pumped into Israel from evangelical Christians than actually from American Jews. And as I've mentioned many times, Zionism does not equal Judaism. There are more Christian Zionists within the United States than there are Jews in the world, just by sheer numbers there are. And for the evangelical Christians, some Christians, it's just, they don't know what they're doing. But for the evangelical Christians, they believe all the Jews need to be within Israel to bring about the end times so that the Jews can burn in hell. So they are sending money to Israel and to the Jewish people in various places to promote Israel so that we can burn in hell, which is really just a lovely neighborly thing to do. Okay, I want to jump to, let's see. Yeah, let's go to this part. She says we've got to put pressure on members of Congress in the U.S. As if any more pressure could be put on the members of Congress to be pro-Israel. They voted 412 to 1 for something that is demonstrably false, for equating anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism. That's what they voted. 412 to 1 in the House. They voted 97 to 0 in the Senate to send weapons to Israel to continue the genocide. So yeah, we really need to pressure Congress a little more. She then says, for many years I've tried to explain that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, which is utterly false. That there are millions of anti-Zionist Jews around the world. And so her saying this is garbage, but that is one of their big propaganda techniques, is to claim anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. She says anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory that constantly changes, and so it has a different face, different twist in different periods. And then this is my favorite part. She says the new anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism, completely false, utterly false. And she says Israel has become in a certain way the Jew of the world, which is so horrific and so garbage and so bullshit. And the reason she has to say that is, again, to make it so that no one dare criticize Israel because it means you're anti-Semitic, which is bullshit. And in fact, the real truth is that Israel, the Israeli government, the IDF, and many Israelis are making anti-Semitism around the world a lot worse, because you are committing genocide. You are murdering innocent people. You've murdered over 23,000 in 3 months, 70% of them women and children. And you're doing that and then saying that if anyone's opposed to that genocide, then you are anti-Semitic, which means that if you, because they're conflating committing genocide with being Jewish, many people who don't dig deep into these issues think that all Jews support genocide, that all Jews support this. And then they start to hate Jews because they go, wow, you guys are committing genocide. But no, we're not. Israel, the government, and the IDF are committing genocide. So she's actually making anti-Semitism a lot worse. She says we have to let this go on freely. We have let this go on freely for too long. We have to take action. And then he talks about how people say Hamas wants a ceasefire and Israel only continues fighting. And then he says, why are we not coming to these news stations and saying we want a ceasefire? Well, for one thing, most people in the Israeli government and most people in the U.S. government are not actually calling for ceasefire. They might be like Biden saying things like they need to minimize civilian deaths, but he's not saying I demand a ceasefire right now. So they're actually not saying that, first of all. Most in the Israeli government are not saying that. Some in the Israeli government are saying literally we want to wipe out all Gazans. So that's the opposite of a ceasefire. That is just pro-genocide. She goes, we have to understand that tens, if not hundreds of military conflicts. Oh, yeah, I love this part. We'll wrap up after this. She says, hundreds of military conflicts around the world, and these people only demand that Israel have a ceasefire. Only Israel. Well, first of all, utterly false. Many of us, such as this guy, say that we need a ceasefire in all those instances. The proxy war in Ukraine, the assault and 20-year war in Afghanistan, which we only pulled out of last year, the destruction and killing of Iraq, of Syria, of Libya, of Yemen, so many countries. No, actually, many of us are declaring that all of those need to stop. So when she says, oh, they only are angry at Israel, bullshit. Secondly, if there are people out there that literally have woken up to Israel's genocide and demand a ceasefire, and they have not been outspoken or prevalent for other conflicts around the world, maybe it's because in the other conflicts around the world, they're not nearly the numbers or the scale or the rate that Israel is killing innocent people. That doesn't make the other conflicts okay. But Israel killed more innocent civilians in a month in Gaza than innocent Ukrainians were killed in the entire year and a half proxy war to that point. In a month. The average rate of the average mortality rate or whatever, the average murder rate, for lack of a better term, in modern war of children killed in modern war is like 6 to 8%, the studies have shown. 6 to 8% children, which is still horrific, and I'm still opposed to it. Israel is killing something like 43, 45% children in their bombing. So for those people who have only woken up to the issue with Israel committing genocide, with Israel bombing aggressively and killing so many people, for those people, there's a reason they've only now woken up, and it's because the horror of what Israel's doing is on a scale that we have not seen in these other modern conflicts. We have not seen this. And even though the number killed by the U.S. in the war on terror, so the Brown University Cost of War found that the U.S. has killed 6 million people, thanks to our global war on terror, first of all. Yet again, I'll say I have been opposed to and outspokenly opposed to all of those all of those conflicts that count in the war on terror that are part of it. However, beyond that, even though 6 million is way more than the 23,000 that Israel has killed, the difference is that stretched over 20 years. And of those 6 million, 5 million of those were indirectly, which means you destroy a water system and then people die due to unclean water, or you destroy the ability to get food, or you destroy the ability to get to hospitals, etc. So many of those do not count on your average list for your average Americans. They don't know about the 6 million. They may know about a few thousand here and there, but many don't know about the sheer numbers. And Israel's death numbers, 23,000, is only counting direct deaths. It is not, that number does not count those who are and continue and will, especially in months to come, die from starvation, from lack of water, from disease, from dirty water, all of those things, which will be in the tens of thousands, if not way more. And those numbers are not on that list. So that is a big reason why people don't necessarily always understand the cost of war, as the study is called. But so her idea that like, oh, people are only mad at Israel. Well, first of all, no. And secondly, for those who are only mad at Israel, it's because of the sheer scale of this genocide is so horrific that it has woken a lot of people up. Okay, I wanted to bring you that important segment. As I said, I've had to travel unexpectedly, so this is my live stream for today. But also, I will not be able to bring live streams Thursday and Friday, my normal times. However, I hope to bring you some segments that'll be coming out. So please keep tuning in. And please checking out for more clips. I put up the clip. You might not get a live stream alert, but I put up the clips at both youtube.com/momentofclarity and rumble.com/leecamp. So check those places for clips as well as my locals page. And I will see you soon. Keep fighting.